I had thought that marriage would be a partnership built on respect, humor, and loyalty. I never imagined that the woman I loved, my wife Sophia, could turn those very foundations into a stage for humiliation. It all began subtly with little digs and sarcastic remarks, the kind that at first seemed harmless, almost playful. But over time, the teasing grew sharper, cutting deeper, until it became clear that Sophia no longer valued the bond we had built. Or perhaps she never had. The incident that changed everything happened on a quiet Friday evening. I had planned a small, intimate celebration, just the two of us. I wanted to express my love in a simple, meaningful way. As I got down on one knee and presented the ring, ready to renew our vows and reaffirm our commitment, I expected joy, tears, a smile. Instead, she looked at me, rolled her eyes, and laughed. "I'd rather hug a skunk than do that," she mocked, her words dripping with disdain. For a moment, I froze, trying to comprehend the sheer audacity of her reaction. The love I had poured into our relationship, the years of patience, support, and devotion, all reduced to a punchline in her sarcastic quip. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I didn't react impulsively. I knew that this was a pivotal moment, a decision point that would define the course of our marriage from here on. I slowly let the ring slip from my fingers and clink onto the table between us. My voice was calm, almost eerily so. As I said, "Yes, you already did." The words were simple but heavy with meaning. It wasn't just a remark. It was a statement, a reflection of the betrayal I had sensed for months, but had chosen to ignore. The smirk on her face faltered slightly, replaced by confusion and a flicker of guilt. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of a confrontation. I let silence take its place, letting the gravity of my words sink in. The evening progressed in a tense quiet. Sophia tried to change the subject, to deflect, to make a joke of my reaction. But I remained still, a measured observer of her behavior. I had grown tired of being manipulated by her sarcasm, her contempt masked as humor. This was my statement, my boundary. The ring was no longer just a symbol of love. It had become a testament to the respect and integrity that she had discarded. By the time the night ended, I knew that our relationship could never go back to the way it had been. Her mockery had pierced deeper than any argument, any fight could. I had chosen to respond not with anger, but with clarity, exposing the truth in the quietest yet most powerful way possible. The act itself, the words spoken, and the undeniable message that I would no longer tolerate humiliation in the guise of affection. The days that followed were filled with tension, unspoken words, and subtle tests of character. Sophia tried to continue as if nothing had happened, maintaining her usual sarcastic tone. But I observed everything. Every glance, every joke, every attempt to belittle me was noted. I realized that her mockery wasn't just a one-time outburst. It was a pattern, a reflection of the contempt she had been harboring silently for months. I decided it was time to reclaim my own sense of dignity. I began creating distance, not out of revenge, but to send a clear message. Disrespect and humiliation would no longer be tolerated. I stopped responding to every jab, stopped defending myself against her sarcasm. Instead, I allowed the silence to speak louder than words. She would try to provoke, and I would remain calm, collected, and impenetrable. The tension was palpable, and I could see it in her eyes. Confusion, frustration, and slowly the realization that her games no longer had power over me. One evening, I invited her to a quiet dinner at our home. I didn't decorate, didn't play music, didn't make grand gestures. I simply sat at the table waiting. She entered expecting another reaction, an apology, an explanation, a dramatic confrontation. But I offered none. I handed her a small envelope instead. Her brow furrowed in curiosity as she took it, the subtle anxiety in her posture betraying her. Inside was a letter, concise yet powerful. I wrote about the years we had shared, the respect and love I had given, and how her words and actions had undermined that trust. I didn't accuse. I simply narrated the truth of my experience, the emotional toll of being mocked and disrespected. As she read, I remained silent, giving her space to absorb every word. Her laughter, the sarcastic quips, the condescending remarks, all of it had faded. Her eyes welled up with a mixture of guilt, shame, and the dawning realization of the hurt she had caused. She looked up at me, voice shaky. I didn't realize. I thought I was joking. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. Jokes are harmless when they are funny, but when they break trust and hurt the person you love, they become something else entirely. By the end of the evening, the dynamic had shifted. Sophia could no longer hide behind humor. She had faced the truth of her actions in the quiet, in the absence of dramatic confrontation, and in the deliberate weight of my response. The lesson had been delivered not with anger or shouting, but with clarity, intention, and an undeniable display of self-respect. The next few days were a study in subtle power shifts. Sophia tried to resume her usual routine, attempting sarcastic remarks and playful jabs, but I remained unmoved. Each time she tried to provoke, I responded with calm neutrality, an impenetrable quiet that frustrated her more than any argument could have. The realization was settling in. The mocking, the disrespect, and the condescension would no longer control the narrative of our marriage. Then came the moment of reckoning I had been preparing for quietly all along. A close friend of ours had invited her to a small gathering, expecting her to show her usual charm and wit. I allowed her to go, but what she didn't anticipate was that I had already shared my feelings with mutual friends and family. They had been subtly informed, not to shame her publicly, but to ensure that the truth of her words and actions would not go unnoticed. The dinner became a quiet battlefield. Sophia was confronted with polite, respectful reminders of her behavior. The weight of her sarcasm and mockery now reflected back in a way she could not dismiss or rationalize. Returning home that night, the tension between us had transformed. Sophia sat quietly, subdued, the usual fire in her eyes replaced with reflection. She spoke softly, almost hesitantly. I never realized how much I hurt you. I thought my words were harmless jokes, but I see now. I nodded, keeping my voice calm and even. It wasn't about the jokes. It was about respect, trust, and understanding the boundaries of love. Mockery can wound deeper than any argument, especially when it comes from the person who is supposed to value you above all others. Over the following weeks, a gradual shift occurred. Sophia became more attentive, more considerate, and more conscious of how she expressed herself. She apologized, yes, but it was her actions that truly reflected the change. Small gestures of care, thoughtful words, and genuine acknowledgement of my feelings. The marriage we had once allowed to drift into contempt slowly began to find balance again. Not through forced reconciliation, but through earned respect. Looking back, I realized that the evening when I dropped the ring and spoke the simple words, "Yes, you already did," was more than just a dramatic moment. It was the catalyst for transformation. A turning point that forced Sophia to confront her behavior and face the consequences of her mockery. Silence, absence, and deliberate reflection can be more powerful than anger, more impactful than confrontation. In the end, the lesson was clear. Respect in a relationship is non-negotiable. Humor at the expense of love is dangerous, and those who take the devotion of their partners for granted must eventually face the truth. Sophia's laughter that night had been a moment of betrayal, but it also became the first step toward accountability, reflection, and ultimately a renewed understanding of what it truly means to honor the bond of marriage.